One Life in Donnington. Let's take a dive through my home estate. A place I've tried to escape since my first brainwave. I'll show you flat roofs and wayward avenues, shopping trolleys that become steeds at 2 a.m, next to mowed down greenery lying abandoned due to overuse. I used to deliver newspapers along this route. This spot right here has a great Wrekin view. Back in my youth, it reminded me of you. New roads, new horizons, new people to meet. Let's keep moving to the end of the street, where a house is sent letters from the wicked government, asking a mother if she's recovered from her own ill head. Like her bed is 4-poster when she can barely pay rent. Her pathway displays a name written in cement. Our descent continues with the drop-offs at Mackey's. The clock towers over us while we're waiting for taxis to take us out of this place and onto a higher plane, with house party nights and endless summer days. But our dreams remain chained like bicycle frames. The keys are locked away. We pray in cars under stars. They say we can be anything we want to be, such as royalty or prime minister of this great country, if we work as hard as anyone who's born into money. So we hunt for hidden weaponry, hoping they see our cannon fire. And where spirits only fade, there will one day be a parade. The Social Hangover. Today, tiredness has strapped itself to my ankle bones. I'm walking upstairs with adult weight, dragging eyelids open, nudging consciousness, still lying in the road, desperate to drive along that towering bridge and back into. Last night, the strokes of 3, 4 and 5 passed me knowingly like a former lover. Grudges were embedded long before the peak. There were teeth marks left in breeze blocks, street signs stolen as the town went under. Down a park slide, we deep dived life. Climbed theatre roofs to discuss our plays. Threw our shoes, plus socks, in frost, before settling on home. American video calls, empty cereal bowls. Maybe 6 or 7 goodnight smokes with a slumped hug. Voice box croaked during the final tokes. And I'm under covers. Today, tomorrow. There are crumbs on a camera lens and fingerprints smudged on mirrors hidden behind a face. I'm not coherent. Feeling anything but God this Sunday. Savages. Ransom note in the post this morning. Simile for me, but reality to the savages. Their class is cocaine mixed in cannabis. Knives loaded and explosives carried. Mouths foaming at the thought of action. 1,000 threats spoke with conviction. Horizontal weapons on the table dresser. Since when did we mention the press here? Message to my teachers. During my lifetime, teachers have been kings. Mr. Ellison, with his football obsession, dared declare the father worse than the Fuhrer. Across the hall, Mr. Summerhaze gave us life lessons, like adults have first names too. Paul was next in line, a stoker of fiery debate. He painted landscapes on political wings, propaganda and the bluebirds of South Wales. He tried his best, but Pete pulled me aside when depression began to blacken my mind. Bigger steps made things more complex, but he welcomed me back to his class, always asked how my mother was doing, embraced my erratic emails and career plans, until we lost contact after his retirement party. Now I write this poem from a pit of shame. A decade on, and my destiny remains lost. Sometimes I meet royalty again in the shops. My head is hung, and my words are cut short. I'll never stop trying to be what you thought. Explaining anxiety. Like looking down the throat of a carrion crow, abandoned by its mother and left to eat alone. The heat from each brick under the toes radiates and glows as much as those on either shoulder bone. Superior eyes in the room, cocked and pointed at you. Your shoes, your coat, wallet, or hotel reservation. Footsteps follow close behind and grind the fear. Though kind intention only ease when home is near. Eric the Cactus. Delivered to us by an optimistic gentleman in a black Stetson cap, who spent his days waving village traffic down with an open hand. It's been 4 years since you were sat on the bookshelf in Kath's house. You stood proud, surveying the fine china made across the border, wrapped up in donated newspaper articles and pristine hand-me-downs, while my inky fingers welcomed regulars who only ever looked around. Each weekend we were greeted by bright smiles set in permanent shadow. Sometimes I declined banknotes on the street for carrying dismantled tables. I'm still searching for namesakes when perched on local stones above sea level. Friends like Elvis were divisive figures due to their signature tobacco smells. Under a green bus shelter, I laughed at his frown about a Midlands town. Thinking about the rows of vacant church seats still leaves me cold, even now. As I watch needles drop onto rocks and a solitary shell, your frame shrivels daily and bends you crooked like a question mark. Oh, Eric, will I ever meet your father again to discuss your burial? Emetophobia. There's a spike housed in this stomach lining. A hideous beast, cracking knuckles. A snake curling in circles. Flush them out with cups of water. Leave them starved like mediocre stars. Avoid all sudden movement. Block each hole that could let a sense explode. And pray to God the grenade is just a dud. Fresh fruit shared. Each day we carry our names through urban terrain. For every letter laid out and shining atop the cityscape, 1,000 more become garbage scattered in darkness. Yet I'm courted into thinking I'm on the right street by algorithms selling dopamine down sideways alley. Too soon after bearing my soul on the infinite scroll, tourists flock and flap to get at the itch on my back. Their words cut deep like plastic knives at a banquet. Their hearts warm like the walls of an empty fridge. Breadcrumbs left behind only lead to the trapdoor. Those in luxury estates who threw paint on a throne, their patches of land fertile and thriving up to the gates, offer tips on organic growth that can build into empires, while those packed in high-rise blocks act like bandits, egos painted loud on knock-off flags hung to balconies. What am I in this black hole of corrupted competition? Views above the skyline only provide anxious thoughts. Occasionally, I find answers in unseen neighbourhoods. An outstretched hand holds a glass of chilled apple juice. Now we go round each other's house to share fresh fruit. Warren's Way. A single magpie follows, mocks my folly down the silky path, watches me pass old railway stations, hops around mad vegetation, trembles like a rabid dog in dirt, stands waiting above tunnels and unnamed bridges, heading straight for the south coast. I exit the wood with thumbs up, pull off my ear defenders and let lobes cool off in oxygen pools. Enter through the side door. All rules are abandoned, like dog tearing up fox. We eat white loaves, eggs poached, plastic potatoes, and a couple of items off the children's menu. My appetite is applauded, and I'm thankful for such a throwback feast. When drowsiness lets itself in, both chef and beast access the same dream. I'm left with a handful of passions and tattoos on repeat. Bite off 2 fingers, still chewing rings when Elder spits out the only tongue he's ever taught me to imitate. His knowing look of devilish frenzy. Our cook wakes up to nod along with the crazy. Dog jumps up and licks Master's chin. Begin to think about the untouched piano keys hidden behind that golden mouth. Hope that the carpet can finally retire. Looking through a chintzy cabinet filled with the same shit since '86, I imagine knocking out the wall my family is so afraid to see fall. Street becomes a magpie's nest. Finally out of the Warren's way. The Devil. I've never once met the devil, although I felt his presence. Inside my cavernous skull, after torch extinguished, a couple of licked fingers linger in smoky darkness. I've never once met the devil, but I believe I've seen him before, among dust in the history books, captured in stills on a film reel. Hollywood crooks misunderstood. The good die when earth is shook. I've never once met the devil, so how will I know I've found him? Will weapons be pointed? Will garments be square? Maybe I'll test the milky waters, see which army drowns me there. "280 words. Goodbye kiss to the day I'll miss. Put headphones on and select a song. Down the cobblestones until further decision. Division like the very fabric of football. Could choose my normal route to the square. Just 4 corners to take. A simple shape. See proud flags made of organic thread. All the colours I like will be on display. Although, what if I head down Butcher Row instead? Sure, it's steeper down the Shuts, but I fancy my luck out there today. Before the leap, I see a wall so opposite to my position it's hostile. How long have these concrete eyes watched on? I'm terrified and contemplate calling in sick. Return to rich address and don't overthink. Then in each direction, groups meet at the centre. There's pointing and shouting and spit flying into hair that's in flames and ignites more people to march out deluxe doors left ajar as kids peer through windows above the obscenity. Hesitate to whisper, future back in that house, until I see bricks change angle. Thinking in pink, shout loud about my background, grab the handle of both sides, point my crooked nose at the stone. Let's climb this together, peace and love forever. Those at the back can't hear my speech, but those really listening cheer and preach. Reach for ladders or offer cupped palms, touch the top layer but get knocked off by a flare thrown from out of nowhere. Hunt the culprit while the victim burns. Bodies clamber to sample some action like a mound of sugar infested with ants. Look back at my house in a peaceful daze. Turn to the melee and see a knife in my face. The Gardens. In the garden with the cherry tree, where daffodils curb the fence, cats in long grass stalk the birds, and the rhubarb patch is bursting. The back of next door's shed, a white wall of pebble dash. It's one almighty canvas, the same size as a goal. In the garden with the trampoline centre, first love sits poised in morning air. Though we haven't shut our eyes all night, we're more alive than ever here. King of the burning woodpile, trimmed weeds in a mound, neighbours chirping out of view, sport scores over a blaring tune. In the garden that's become a home, close to my place of worship, guests wave outside the temple, years and years of well wishes. Looking out for hedgehogs, feeding a family of foxes. Like a wave in my brain, memories come flooding in. In the garden that was aforementioned, long after daylight has drowned, a friend of mine sits next to me, and we gaze through broken cloud. We've seen everything here. Sun, rain, snow, and hail. This garden knows all my pain, and has helped me to heal. End of May. Touches of pink on skin and sky. Silhouettes of swifts pivot a perfect slither of crescent moon. Garden sprinkler spits and splutters, fearing winter on the edge of summer. Thursdays. Hear the Weekend call out my name on a mixtape. Beats the cursed kid of 2008 couldn't believe. Weakened by letters in envelopes and journals. Every headline read like predictable junk mail, stuffed into the pages of a life in solitude. Punished himself for abandoning his youth. Cruelty continued and relegated progress. The mess left built higher than a sugar rush. When the crash came, it was always Thursday. Smashed up faces of a watch, shoes split at the toes, broken table legs, phones grazed from concrete. The citizens continued, so we kept imploding. Each week came a late playoff final defeat, gifted a long sleeve stained in grassy green. Our boy believed he grew into all of his spite, but he had grime glued under them fingernails as he typed bullet holes into a fledgling friendship. There were times when he became addicted to life, outside clubs dancing on the hands of the night, inside cabs singing with his underground band. Junkies will tell you all about hard landings. Infected with the sickness on his Isle of Bile, mental health problems were an understatement. Like butcher's meat, he should have been sectioned. So in this bottled message to the day we're sailing out from, give thanks to the shipwrecks who touched sand, apologise for the storms and oceans left behind. The bottle. If one could sell feelings inside of glass bottles, I would spend the excess fat in my bank account buying the hit of humidity which encases us both immediately after flying into a warmer climate. This would be a highly reckless purchase, however, as the very purpose of such suffocation pleasure is only a byproduct of our time spent together, cooling off in hotel sanctuaries, museum aircon, and the shade of a hilltop tree within a cemetery, none of which could ever be contained in the bottle. Unknown windows. My theory was written on the other side of town. Eyes that had only watched the world through a single pane of glass found reflections all round. Where I used to see grey, crisp formations of cloud. Even in the house, blocks of door painted one colour were replaced with frosted figures cutting cake. Anyway, yesterday a man wearing a Union Jack flag on his waist and sleeve told me his worries. 5 or 6 cars parked, 8 or 9 bedrooms lying cold and lonely while in the south of France. To lose sight of the windows in one's life, I thought, as he asked me about the proletariat. Bliss indeed. Meeting my MP in the street. The kind of day that urges you to observe. Learn what time-kissed Victorian bricks exist. Drink and reminisce above the high street. Saw for a while before hooked back to ground. Our Member of Parliament is storming down that beloved stretch of patterned cement. Stand fully charged, a magnet waiting for contact. Sockets analyse wicked entourage as my options start flicking through a Rolodex of responses. There's an influx of questions, injustice and inquiries, like all those stories stuck in permanent sundawn, meaning there's always hope but never warmth. Polished black shoes now by the ironic news agents. Contemplate resorting to expletives, but fear irrelevance like a rampaging elephant. Then in fantasy fireworks my sparkler drowns. A rebellious town resident repelled without glance, reduced to the rosette on that expensive lapel. Poem for Park So Dam. Born 30 days apart in the early 90s, musical fan and Blue Dragon holder, you fought parental disapproval to fulfill your dreams on the big screen. South Korea to renowned global acclaim, Jessica's jingle infected Western culture, and yet your name remains underground in towns and cities throughout this land. Park So Dam. I write as my ink dries up and the world scratches my head with a coin. If I ever escape the fate of my own family, I'll start a fan club for you in Chicago, Illinois. Mahershalalhashbaz. There's an army of square lights on the ceiling. My name is a sandwich here with no filling. Just two thin slices, side by side, both white. I've longed continental tastes my entire life. Even to dip my bread in egg would suffice. Well, Christ, I'll take a trip to the bakery later. A crustier loaf would remain in the teeth, or perhaps granary could help plant a seed. En route, there's a biblical treat in the street. It's a mouthful from the Mahershalalhashbaz company. They're rebranding after selling handmade wooden frames for a decade. And in dense writing their message eats at me. That night, I immerse my head in June's still air, where all the moonlight is hidden behind a tree. Low-key poetry. Someone send me 50 cigarettes. Keep me awake far past sunset. Get the football on immediately and make it a fiery affair. Drown out this mop and bucket mouth. Find me a guitar string to silence a theatre, then strum all the chords in unison. Whisper powerfully into the crowd's ear about the journey to solar eclipse bliss. Ignore the scattered failures, the stamps on lampposts, brash stickers of the past cornered in all that success, distraction from the looming task ahead. Let the teeming rain return to my brain, where pie stains survive in cement. Jackdaws squawk and there are talks of walks across the kissing couple hills, instead of pizza orders set for 10. Counting stock with matching socks. Clocks are the enemy these days, but they may be my best friend. Mornin. A cup of black coffee that's been handed round to pull us back from university deadline cliff edges and the fading sound of revelry, sits barely sipped on my lap. My stomach still churns when chirps burn through the curtains. My thoughts are like the innards of that gaping FedEx truck, stacked, scattered and battered by brakes, all stuffed like an otter's corpse encased behind glass and museum walls. Killer beats have helped me cheat every bloody morning, but today I'm diving cordless into enemy waters. It's quiet, and I recline with this peaceful corner of the riot a few more times. Then bus exhaust monologues lift my spirits further. Their words carry my body all the way to Europe. And finally, let me fall in love. Obnoxious Heatwave. My body clock is set to Vienna day trips. Epic walks atop the white cliffs of Dover, and avoiding sun among Roman forums. Only here it's flexed bare chests, belly buttons piercing snail trail hair, and tattoos that sweat through skin. Discount booze hangs on booming breath, as a headache-inducing marijuana stench crawls up my nostrils from inside pockets, like a chef advertising leftovers to the streets via an air vent. I'm craving cartoon fantasy. Empathy in the world, even for humidity. As they deplore a break in proceedings, I pray the storms bring some fresh relief. In a quarantined life, Your dreams become routine. Once rare rainbows are now as common as windows. Like a tooth loose inside the mouth, internal screams seem to echo even louder. In a quarantined life, grinding teeth kicks off migraines. A muted response hardens the heart, and clanking bottles sound like prison bars. But it's the silence in between that really gets to you. In a quarantined life, frayed jeans drag along 1,000-mile floor. You're back to doing laps on checkered tiles, downtown centre aisles. Trapped, confined, suffocated, undefined, chest tight, skull binding. In a quarantined life, you fear the worst by speaking these verses. Scratching 30 years roying for the blind. All passion resigns in a puzzle of likes. Time with friends, feeling alive, happened only in the mind. In a quarantined life, there's surprise in a book spine. You absorb the cover with dry eyes and find the grey between its barcode lines. Then in a swirling field, birds of prey define the day. Finally, you're away. Going on 30. 1. There's little pleasure in a decade thrice lived. I've been waiting here for my estranged brother named Dance, who ran out on me despite his free diary entries. Even though I'm desperate for a reunion, I'm also bitter for the jives lost. 2. People only buy into words if they think they have worth. I'm in yesterday's underwear, flagging down ships, while a teenage busker sits between hip-hop royalty. I've been begging to set sail long before this premature birthday, but I never wanted it enough. 3. No one walks away unscathed from the stalking grey wolves. I've stepped further than I ever pictured. Fawns arriving in ascending numbers are warned routinely, but continue to ignore all advice, as those who scrap with the pack tell me to just enjoy the woods. 4. You must burn this poem right in your future's face. Laugh cry emojis. 4 kings rode in, with strings and skins, to bring salvation to me, on the streets of New Year's Eve. Then my friend would lend contents of bookends that induced solutions to a common teenage problem. I became incepted and indebted to the greatest escape artist, plus drowned out voice, who talked me through the agony of lonesome pains. Though association fades, those days still replay in heavy bass, or on the screaming face of a DVD case. But when handshakes are met with drunken compliments, it makes me question what it all meant. Veins no longer contain baselines or nets, because the rent doesn't even cover travel expense. There are hotel pillars in a lake-up town. Tacky Christmas decks have been taken down, while 2 Jags are parked up outside Dad's house. The nice-eyed lad, Welsh running track, smiling dancer, and security-defying chap in a flat cap keep me from collapse. As the album dies, benign podcasts thrive. franchise rise, repeated lines, gym life, energy drink lies, and paper bag highs make laugh cry emojis hard to find with Wi-Fi or offline. Hopelessness. I tried to explain my psyche like Charles Bukowski. I penned a list that included being angry all night at my uselessness in other earthlings' lives, plus the lack of humanity endured whilst working. But I concluded the result was mere petulance, probably because my next mood sank deeper. I vehemently believe this country has a sickness that shackles the joys of life. I felt its hands strangle me. Its fingerprints are still moulded in my brain. The words it suppresses every day reach me from far below finished lakes and deep inside countryside estates. But I can't explain the stories I've been told. Only share what it means to lose all hope myself. And I could polish that reality inside of a metaphor. But for what? In order to see the light, we must shine it on every naked limb. Hopelessness, then, is searching for that very word on Google while your love sleeps. Feeling your heart rejoice and concave simultaneously when the text describes everything you've kept locked inside for X number of days. Sometimes in the lonely dead of night, sometimes when noon stays by your side. Energy burns that a good run can't fix. After splitting living rooms, it's the wrist. It's tough to admit, but these thoughts do exist. And now you know all this. Please forgive me should I despair when hearing it repeated, or write all this out when nothing is hinted. If this triggers problems deeper rooted, I'll delete it. Destined for Depression. I'm surrounded by scraps of paragraphs that make up a faux suicide note addressed to all the neglectful souls who left this wounded fox to survive on his own in the woods. His home has always been close to the 2 apple trees that grew enough to provide food and shelter, despite their roots suffering from rot, and the farmer concentrating more on the henhouse. There's a high mortality rate for those who try to escape the life drawn on an oracle deck of captivity. Making the most of the temporary moments of therapy is the only control he has then. But taking a gamble on a clear country road could turn his fleece to ash until the next deadly contraption. Another distracting home daydream. Upon muffled cries from Kendrick Lamar's sample, I'm on the west cheek of my town's unpainted face. A mole in the shape of an abandoned tower block stands and surveys dead skin and all the veins at its base. There's a cycle path system that never tires, where oversized Converse march through and fly down them tarmac miles. Every number on the clock holds a hand for the times I run full pelt after a night out, saving finances, but also my life, as the magic promptly dies once my key finds the jagged black hole it was designed to enter. I dance with horses, sleepwalk all morning, then stand cold and alone as the beat drowns in silence. The Shropshire Lads. Alfred Edward Housman wrote about this county from London. We smoke pipes and drink pints to honour the scholar's story, which can be checked out at the library. Former learning quarters of an explorer named Charles Darwin, who sits in grey outside, despite leaving town in adolescence. Returning from Galapagos to the Mount, where my parents met in mental health sickness, gave life to an original species that theorists would have hated, like Robert Clive, who earned his knighthood by looting India, cried in Parliament, now we want his stage ousted. His house is next to the cottage where I sleep restless because myself and a few other Shropshire lads failed to escape, even after studying Centurion debate, athletic form, and being serenaded by greats. Where are the names of those who rose from minimum wage? Commonwealth. I always dream about school days. Even though one has been reduced to unclaimed brick, I explore its narrow corridors followed by assembly halls decorated in sports equipment. Like Dom Cobb's memory prison, I feel like I'm there to fix something. These dreams started happening long after finding the clubs buried in earth that dented my naivety. After tweed became fashion, and when the green fields and tennis courts of our neighbouring college still resembled my life in the trench. Words like posh and snob were the only examples of difference then, until I became a witness. Now it's estate v estate. Homeless means vagrant, and they're all as valued as a box sandwich. Everyone has their own intoxication, be it bargain wine or cider, the Daily Mail or the Eye, where Brookside is a crossword answer filled in whilst feeding mallards white bread in the park, and not one of the Midlands' hottest beds for arson. I could be the biggest hypocrite of all, though. I grew fond of plays and began to write poetry. So what would they think of me back home? A shit football match where the ref cost us the game still pumps through my veins, I assure thee. And that left ventricle beats here on a Saturday afternoon too. Being in the middle of Commonwealth is a lonely place. But there will be a monopoly of empty space around my mediocre grave if I assume to know the better or lesser sort without consultation. It's time then to jump on the wall of that private college I knew nothing about when we walked back from a night out. It's time to dance on its concrete foundation. To be a fool in front of my peers and oppressors. To live with both eyes shut, but take action when the alarm goes off.